Breaking news this morning, though, 1.16 million visas were granted for work, study or family reasons, including dependents, in the year ending June 2024. And 38,784 people were detected arriving in the UK illegally in the same time period. They're calling it irregular routes, right? But that's the new government term for illegal migrants, it seems to me. Let's talk to Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Robert, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well indeed. Thanks for talking to us. This is not a surprising figure. We were led to believe, though, by Rishi Sunak before the election that the number of visas granted for work, study and family reasons would actually have gone down this year because they were supposedly clamping down on the number of dependents that were coming. But it looks about the same number as last year, doesn't it?
Precisely. The figure is still far too high. As you say, we're still looking at about 1.1 million people coming into the country each year via these long-term routes. Obviously, we've got James Cleverly and his leadership bid at the moment trying to make a real virtue out of the clampdown that was introduced at the end of last year. But I think what these figures have really shown is that the Tories, having inflicted us with the mass migration that we saw over the last 5 years, their final swan song, their last attempt to try and curb this is floundering somewhat. And, you know, you look at the countries now that these people are coming from to come and work in the UK, they're not the kind of Western countries that perhaps they used to be 10 years or so. We've got India, Nigeria, Pakistan and Zimbabwe, for instance, as the leading countries, non-EEA countries from which individuals are coming. And this is important because the fact of the matter is that not all migrants are the same. Some come and, you know, are offering huge economic value. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have a system where they're entering the country anymore. We have a non-EEA migrant system, which studies have shown costs us between £8 and £9 billion every year per cohort. So we're slowly compounding ourselves into a real crisis.
And obviously the numbers of people coming as dependents hasn't gone down really much at all, because unless they've suddenly issued a load more work visas to people who want to actually come and work as opposed to their family members, you know, the number would appear not to have moved very much at all. But we were told in January, February and March that somehow we would see the benefit of their new policy.
Well, obviously, the Tories and Cleverly would argue that we won't see the full throughput of that of those decisions until the end of the year. But the fact of the matter is that the clamping down on dependents was simply only reversing a problem inflicted on the country by the Tories in the first place. A lot of those that have come on dependent routes previously would now probably just be looking to apply for a healthcare visa themselves directly, given the criminally low qualifications and threshold that is needed to be awarded one of those. So yeah, it looks like the system is not really been changed too much by the Conservative Party. And I think what we are now going to see under the Labour government is no attempts to go further than what the Tories promised at the end of 2023. And in fact, as you've been discussing earlier today, the conversations with the European Union now look like they might actually be trying to foster in a form of freedom of movement with the EU via the back door as well. So
we were rather marvelling at the
precisely, we're an attractive place to try and come to still. We may not feel it at the moment, but there are still a large number of people that would like to come to the UK. And of course, the youth mobility scheme would only be the thin end of the wedge. We then see it extended to, you know, artists, and then it would be temporary workers. And before you know it, drip, we've got freedom of movement back with the EU in all but name. I think that the problem now that we face is the Conservative Party, with their big, bold plan that they did announce in December last year, have actually inflicted the country with a real problem, because there now seems to be a consensus emerging amongst politicians that there's not much more we can do. You know, we've clamped down on dependents. We dabbled around a little bit with the student visa route as well. So there's not much further that we can do. The simple fact of the matter is that we need a huge overhaul of our migration system. We need to have a look at some of the routes that were opened up under the Conservative Party, such as the health and care visa, and think about really whether we can sustain 1.1 million people coming into our country each year. And I would argue that we couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to Tony Smith yesterday talking to Julie Hartley-Brewer, I think it was, about the Immigration Act itself, which is, as far as he was concerned, completely unfit for purpose, outmoded, outdated, too complicated, and full of kind of, you know, loopholes that can be, you know, exploited by clever immigration lawyers.
The system's a joke. The system's an absolute dream for those left-wing lawyers. There are so many little hooks onto which you can hang spurious claims. There are so many back routes. There's a whole industry now about keeping our daughters wide open. And the fact of the matter is that politicians for far too long have been guided by these so-called experts, guided by these vested interests, and not actually taking decisions for the country as a whole. They've instead allowed themselves to be victim of really intense lobbying activities, whether it be from those in, say, the care sector or whether it be from universities. And the problem now is that the country is almost at a breaking point, and the politicians are out of options that they would find palatable.
Yeah, absolutely right. And what about this 38,000 figure? 38,784 people detected arriving, according to this report, in the UK by irregular routes. Now, you know, we know that they've changed the wording on that, don't we? Because I presume that means illegal routes. I presume that means people coming here on small boats.
Well, they're hardly irregular anymore, are they? I mean,
no. I mean, there's nothing more regular than these trips, is there?
Yeah, the number of times we all wake up every morning and see another picture of another boat coming across. But I think more significant is what the current backlog is on the asylum system as well, which is 118,882, which is now actually at a record high.
Right.
And obviously we've got the Labour Party now planning effectively, as we've discussed previously on your show, an amnesty for a lot of those in that system.
Right.
You know, they're buying up these houses in these local authorities that have perhaps been spared the worst of the illegal migration crisis thus far. So I think what we're going to see is that this problem now is spread further afield. More and more people who perhaps have been looking at this problem aghast but not quite had it on their doorstep are going to find that they're going to be waking up with, whether it be the irregular migrants, being put up in social housing or temporary accommodation in their patch as well.
I was going to suggest you can be pretty sure that of those 38,784 people detected arriving here, 38,784 of them will still be here.
Of course they will be. That's what they've been promised, and that's what they've seen by the political class in this country for 5 or so years now, that once they do manage to do a step foot on the sandy beaches of Kent, then they're pretty much guaranteed a place here for life. And the deterrent that was put forward with Rwanda was obviously very, very flawed and wouldn't have worked without the ECHR. But the fact of the matter is now the Labour Party have completely stripped away any semblance of a deterrent. And, you know, the announcements that were made yesterday by Yvette Cooper, 100 new individuals working in the NCA on this issue, it just simply isn't enough. And there's no real concerted effort from the government to put forward a clear signal to those looking to make the crossing that they simply aren't welcome.
No, exactly right. Good to talk to you, Robert Bates. Thank you very much indeed.